Hi, everybody. First, before we even start, I want to acknowledge that I have been able to moderate a lot of panels over the past few years at Forbes, and some of those panels have also been on AI, and it is a true pleasure to be on an all-women panel focused on AI. So kudos to the SOCAP team. They've really done a great job at this conference, making sure there's been representation. And I'm glad that I'm outnumbered 3-1 right now. But check with me afterwards if I'm still glad. So I can't see everybody, but I want to ask one quick question. How many of you all have had a conversation about AI over the past 3 days? If you could raise your hands. Oh my God. Okay, it looks like to me about everybody or most people. Yeah. How many of you feel like you have a really good handle on the mental frameworks and the mental maps of how you're going to apply what you've learned to AI, about AI in the future? Raise your hands. Okay, well, that's our goal right now, ladies. That's our goal. So I really want to get into, I think, some of the conversations about mental models and frameworks, because I think people have heard a lot over the past few days, and maybe it's all kind of a little mixed up like pasta primavera in their head. So our job for the next 20 minutes or so is to maybe help them understand and think about different ways from the perspective of 3 areas of the opportunity that exists for people in this room around AI and investing in organizations and NGOs and impact entrepreneurs that are really using this technology in powerful ways. That we're going to talk about the equity and accessibility of it, and then the ethical considerations. And I know all of those mix up together, so I'm hoping we're all going to just have a conversation, and I'm going to try and stay out of the way. So maybe I'll start with you, Mutale. If we could, maybe how should we think about the broadest opportunity for AI to really address the broadest social needs and the broadest kind of calling for change on a societal and a global level? Size this for us in the potential impact frame.
Yeah, so thank you for that, and hello, everybody. I think the thing that we need to do first is really have a clear idea in our mind in terms of what AI systems can do and what AI systems cannot do. So thinking about AI systems as knowledge systems that can sort information in certain use cases, they can make decisions. The things that they can't do is make us more human. The things that they can't do is make high-stakes decisions about people who have groups of populations whose historic data has encoded them already from a deficit frame. So, for example, one of the use cases that I always bring up is the campus algorithm and the investigation that ProPublica did on them in 2016. And what they did was use historical data around recidivism to develop an AI system that would decide who stayed in jail and who went home. Surprise, surprise. The black defendants were remanded at higher rates than the white defendants, even though they had the same profile, even though they'd done the same crimes, because the underlying data was encoded in these assumptions of black criminality. That's a really good example of putting an AI system as a moral agent. Where I think the opportunities really lie, and if we look at the Nobel Prizes that have just been announced, are in systems where we need to ignite the imagination and look for the possible. So the founder of DeepMind got a Nobel Prize in physics this last time because what they were doing using AI was looking at new configurations of proteins that will, once applied, help us really think through big issues like cures for cancer, cures for other diseases that are impacting, again, these use cases. So I think once we realize that there has to be not just a human in the loop, but a human who wants to use their time, talent, and treasure to fix our biggest problems, that's where your real opportunities for AI lie.
Thank you. It's really helpful, and I know that double-clicking on this humanity, on both kind of how it engages and responds to it. I see you, Paul, nodding throughout Mutale's comments. Tell me from your vantage point, obviously a premier leader in technology in the world, you're grappling with some of these issues every day, and how are you seeing the technology of AI create more accessibility or create that greater potential to recognize the humanity that we should be of greater service to?
Yeah, first of all, it's such a wonderful privilege to be back at SOCAP. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I also, I really loved what you said, and I want to build on it. So we have this philosophy at Salesforce that we call human at the helm, right? So in technology circles, we talk a little bit about human in the loop, about a person checking AI. But you said something really important, which is it starts with knowing what AI is good for and what it's not good for, and what it can't do, including some of the use cases that you cited, is also things like it can help coach us about how we can be better to each other. But ultimately, technology has to be in service of human potential. And that's not just for AI, that's for all technology, right? But that is not a foregone conclusion. And so what I spend my day doing every day is thinking about agentic AI systems in the workplace and thinking about how the way we do work is changing so rapidly because AI is transforming from a deterministic tool to really a partner that we're going to be delegating significant things to. And we have to be very, very wise about what we delegate and what we don't delegate. And we have to be very clear about the governance systems that are built into the technology and on top of the technology and in our government around those choices so that the people remain the center of the transformation, that they're not a subject of the transformation. The transformation is in service of people. And that's what we mean by human at the helm.
Yeah, I really love that. It's because there does become this fetishism or this, and we were talking a bit backstage about the dream solutions that these create. But when we get too wrapped up in the technology, we can also lose that center of humanity.
Right.
And you said humans at the helm.
Yeah.
I really love that. So Ravit, I want to come to you because one of the conversations that I had over the past few days was with an investor, someone who's allocating capital, and thinking to myself, well, I've got my investment thesis. There's all these big questions that are going on. How do I align, maybe that word is too on the nose, but how do I align my thesis, my investment thesis, with also some of these ethical considerations that we were just discussing?
Yeah, this is such a great question to raise specifically at a conference like SOCAP, because I think a lot of people might think of AI as a separate topic. I have my investment thesis, and then also there's AI and AI ethics, right? And it can feel like almost an add-on, right? And it can feel like a chore. Oh no, another thing, right? We had climate, now we have this.
It's just the next thing that we have to figure out.
But I encourage people to think about this differently. So I wouldn't think of AI responsibility or even AI as an add-on, right? If you do already have an investment thesis that is engaged in social impact in some way, it just pertains to AI responsibility by the nature of it, right? So for example, suppose you already have an investment thesis that is about gender equality, race equality. Well, it just has implications for AI automatically because the technology itself has those implications. Or suppose your investment thesis is related to climate. Great, AI just pertains to climate as well because of the carbon emissions, because of the water consumption. That is not inevitable, right? If we have investors that are pushing money in the right direction, we can actually, make a dent. So my advice first would be think of how your investment thesis already just implies things about AI responsibility. So these are just kind of embedded in there. So that's one point I wanted to make. Another point I want to make, which I think the core of this is already clear to impact investors is that AI ethics or responsibility, trustworthiness, whatever you want to call it, is not necessarily cross-purpose to ROI, right? So this is a point you already know from the ESG world, for example, but it bears, it's important to see how this point is true in AI as well. What does it mean to do AI responsibly? For example, it means making sure it works for more people. Well, that's a larger customer base.
Right.
It
An
goes,
addressable market.
yeah,
Right.
goes hand in hand with ROI, right?
Yeah.
Same for what does it mean to make it explainable? It can mean have better feedback loops, so the product just works better.
So I really appreciate you saying that, and Mutali, I see you nodding too. There's a lot of agreement, which is good. Which is good.
They're great.
But to go back to your original comment and maybe building on what Ravit just said, it also it's taken a long time for even people in this room to see addressable markets that are not necessarily visible to them.
Right.
And I know from conversations we've had, that's also the case around AI, that this has a global scale and it can impact communities and individuals that we're not thinking about right now or maybe foreign to us from our lived experience.
Right.
How should we be thinking about this, or how can we size that market in the most inclusive and authentic way?
One of the things that we're really honored to do at AI for the People is that we work with a lot of Silicon Valley companies. And for years now, we're coming up to our 5th birthday, but probably for most of that time, we've worked with the FANG companies. And there's one FANG company in particular who were really thinking about the way to answer some of the critical techno research that was in the field. And they were looking for an answer to Joy Buluimi's 2018 paper around facial recognition not recognizing dark skin. And what they did was that they engaged African-American researchers. They put out a call and other minority-based researchers to look into that research and what could be a technical social fix. The reason that they were so motivated to fund that particular body of work was that they were expanding into developing markets, and they were specifically interested in India as a potential marketplace, as well as Africa being a potential marketplaces. And the reason that they were interested in those two particular geographies is that there are so many young people relative to Europe, America, and Asia. And they decided their next $1 trillion was going to come from dark-skinned people. And what they were able to do was develop new computer vision technology that had a much, much sharper ability to do that recognition work. They embedded it into their Android, they released it, and it became the best-selling Android, not only in the US market where it was tested, but then as they were selling into developing markets as well. And that one product line is now one of their best product lines. And the reason that I bring that up were the people who were commissioning the research, the people that were in the labs, were not people from India or people from Africa. They were actually people from this area, up the road. They were not thinking about what does it mean not to be recognized by a machine. It isn't their lived reality. But because they understood that they wanted to make money for the company and they wanted to grow this product line, they were able to engage people like us and other academic researchers, other members of civil society to do that work. The same true of the US government. We were recently in a White House conversation where they were speaking about the fact that the US government is going to be doing procurement throughout Silicon Valley, particularly in the startup space, to build systems that have to be compliant with US law, have to be privacy respecting. And so through the procurement function, that was another way in which we were getting to this much more responsive technologies. You are investors. You could invest in those companies too.
Yeah. So this brings me to my first principle, and in part what I want to make sure I both have Paul, you and Ravi answer, which is, as people are heading out from this past few days of really absorbing case studies, examples, the two of you, all three of you, but the two of you are erudite thinkers and have to go through some questions that you work through every single day. What are some good questions that are, maybe as people are looking at that they should be using to filter? Am I thinking about this opportunity in AI the right way from perhaps that kind of human-centered perspective? And then maybe I'll come back to you and double-click again on the ethical perspective, or both cases. Well, you mind going first?
Yeah, well, I think if you're evaluating, whether it's you're evaluating AI services for your own organization or you're evaluating investments in, say, startups or larger companies, I think it does touch on some of the things that have already been mentioned. One, how do I know if how do I know if this works? And how will I know if something goes wrong? And is that built into the system? Seems like a basic question. Very, very important. Number two, has this been sufficiently tested? What are your testing protocols? And to Matali's point, who's involved in that testing, right? So for example, at Salesforce, we involve outside parties. We involve our business resource groups, employees from diverse circumstances and backgrounds. We also involve, importantly, we're testing for accessibility, right, at the same time. And by the way, as a side note, AI is turbocharging accessibility. That is a hugely positive, optimistic thing that I'm super into as I'm charged. It's part of my role at Salesforce. Yeah. But it's those sort of I guess what I'm saying these questions, but there's kind of a subtext. And the subtext is sometimes the world of conferences about AI and media about AI makes it seem like it's this big mystical thing. Yeah. But actually the questions to ask are pretty common sense. Like, how do I know this is going to work? Is it going to work for everyone? Is it going to be excluding people? Does it comply with by the way, more than 650 pieces of state-based proposed regulation in this last year? Wow. There is a clear incentive for AI to be responsible if it's going to be adopted.
Yeah, thank you. Ravit, could you add
I have 4 questions.
4 questions.
Yeah.
It's like Passover. I love it. Just keep going.
Yeah, I have 4 questions. When I think of ethics, what I say to investors, actually look at the governance, right? There's this tendency to go to the technical, right? Oh, let you see the data set. No. I think, first and foremost, look at the governance of the company, of the AI, and ask 4 questions. This is inspired by the NIST AI RMF, one of the most influential AI responsibility documents. But the 4 questions are, first, does the company understand its impacts? The social impacts, good and bad, and also the regulatory impacts. So understanding, first, do they understand? Second, measure. Are they measuring any of those impacts? Or even if the product works, really important, measuring before they launch, after they launch, and do they have any kind of strategy? Third, any kind of control. Are they doing anything to reduce the negative impacts? Right? Are there tracking issues? Is there a strategy? And fourth, general governance. Do they have policies? Do they have documentation? Are they talking to stakeholders?
I love it. I may, with humility, add a 5th that I have just learned from my days in philanthropy as well, which is, are they also investing in the human capacity within their organization to use this technology, to learn, to reward the people who are being need knowers? Mutali, to your good, because I think there's this idea we should invest in technology and we should invest in AI, but investing in technology and AI requires investing in the humans that are really
100%.
developing.
Yeah. People are the success mode for AI, and they're also going to be the failure mode for AI, and so it's deeply, deeply important to be investing in people.
So with our final minute, as I suggested to all of you, I consider myself an applied optimist, and I always really appreciate leaving on a note. To quote the philosopher Hannah Arendt, we're in a time of no longer and not yet, and I know some of us are anxious about this for other reasons other than just AI this week. But what is something that each of you can maybe help each of us take away in just a sentence or a thought that we should be optimistic about this new era of AI and our ability to engage in and invest in it? And I'll start with you, Rudy.
This conference actually made me really optimistic because I've been talking with investors and impact investors for a while, and I see that the curiosity about responsible AI increases, the engagement increases, and I am a firm believer of the power of impact investing to really shift the AI ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you. Cheers.
I think what makes me optimistic is that the federal government are coming online as a procurement mechanism. That's a huge market for startups. That's a huge opportunity for investors. And their thesis is one of responsibility because it is a national priority that the United States becomes a leader in responsible AI, and that's going to be great for this type of thinking and this type of work.
Amazing.
I was trying to choose, but I'll choose one, which is there was an amazing paper that came out last year from David Autor, an economist, who talked about how AI could help rebuild equality, help rebuild a robust middle class. And I think that is one potential outcome if we make the right choices with AI, is that AI could act as an equalizing force, as a force for access. Yeah. And that's what makes me optimistic.
Well, I will add, with my gratitude, a note of optimism, because listening to the three of you and also knowing this amount of thoughtfulness and erudite thinking is really changing the world and making it more accessible and inclusive around AI makes me optimistic. So thank you very much, and thank you, SOCAP, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you.